Matt Sims, welcome to Second Nature.
Thank you for having me, Aaron. Nice to be here.
We got so much that we have done. We've kind of run parallel paths for a really long time. We've worked with a lot of the same people. We've been mentored by similar people. We've had a chance to work with some pretty incredible brands throughout our careers. And I don't want to bury the lead because you've launched and established a brand called Courier that we're definitely going to talk about. I'm really excited about it. I'm wearing the socks this very minute. So I want to talk about like launching a brand in the outdoor space and what that actually took to get it off the ground and established. But I also want to talk a little bit more about your background from Lululemon to Fox, working with athletes, doing sports marketing, how you kind of put the whole thing together. I feel like that's a really good place to start, and then we can kind of work our way to launching the brand. Because I also have got to imagine, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, but having done some of the athlete activation and working with athletes on your way to launching a company has got to have informed how you think about launching a brand in the outdoor space. Can you talk a little bit about just like how did that come together, or like how did that kind of inform your trajectory?
Short answer, yes. I think I've been like subtly in the background of my career, um, kind of trying to shape myself in like every different aspect of a business. I've never been like, I never studied business. I never did any of that. Like, but as I've progressed throughout my career, I've always wanted to dip my toes and like, and get at least a base understanding across a business or an organization. And as you said, I've been lucky enough to work for some pretty big established brands, and of course, you for most of it, it's trial by fire, and you get thrust into the deep end. And I my career is definitely a good example of that. You know, getting into a room and having zero idea what you're doing.
You need all you
um,
need is a little bit of information to be dangerous. That's all it really takes,
right?
right?
Yeah, and like and like to realize also that everyone else that you think knows what they're doing in that room also is pretty much flying by the seat of their pants is like a
Yeah.
good way to like look at things and be like, okay, I'm going into this room. I'm going to learn as much as I can, roll the dice, and see what happens.
I heard something earlier today where this guy was like reading books on business is like reading a book about the history of basketball and then trying out for an NBA team.
Yeah, I mean, there's book smarts and then there's like street smarts, right? As I said, I didn't study business or actually even honestly marketing. I didn't study. I studied sports science back in the day. I was a school teacher after that because I got this degree and I was like, well, what the hell do I do with this? Um, and my brother was like, well, maybe you should like do something that'll get you a job. And I was like, yeah. And I guess to understand that is I'm originally from New Zealand and sports marketing was not, and kind of still is not really a thing there, just based on like the size of the country and the economy and how business and brands work down there. So yeah, it's the street smarts and just kind of getting your foot in the door in any way humanly possible. It was kind of how I got my start in sports marketing and specifically with Lulu.
That's a pretty good first job to have in the sports marketing sphere.
Dude, it was, and I've been so incredibly lucky. You know, I left New Zealand as a young, I think I was like 24 maybe, with this goal of like trying to work in sports marketing of what I knew as sports marketing. At the time, I was kind of teaching and coaching snowboarding, and I would come to the States with a bunch of friends who are either on the New Zealand snowboard team or coaching for like big academies, and I got a really cool insight into the pro side of snow sports, you know, and that really started and sparked a bit of flame for me around a potential career doing something around sport. Sport's always been like the central core nucleus of my life and always will be. Um, and it feeds everything from how I've approached my career to this brand that we've just launched. Like it's all to do with sport and what sport teaches you about life. Um, so yeah, I mean, so many lessons learned and crazy that um, I got my start purely from just being relentless at wanting to work in sport and figuring out a way to do it.
Just raising your hand, man. Like so many people underestimate the impact that raising your hand and just like going full force into stuff can have.
And a lot of it, and I'm sure we can get into this because I know you are a master of this as well, is relationship. Like I, as I said, I had this snowboarding kind of dream that was going on back in God, when was it? Like early 2000s, where, I'd come to the States, but at the same time, like I was racing motocross and like at a decently high level back home. But again, I was surrounding myself with these people that were elite. I myself was not. I could hold my own a little bit here and there, but like there's a reason I was never a professional athlete. But um, simply by surrounding myself with some of the best people in the country that I was in, which was New Zealand, um, and then seeing those people then perform and excel on a world stage, and like always being relentless about being around them, being in conversation with them and learning kind of how those worlds were working, kind of inspired me further to kind of get into what you and I both eventually did. Um, because I also saw opportunity, and like working in sports marketing is, in my mind, can be very, very simple because at the end of the day you're working with humans. I think quite often, like with people in this world, and when brands work with athletes are put on these pedestals where they're so far out of reach of society and they're so elevated above your normal day person. But at the end of the day, man, they want to work with good people, and that's how a brand should also approach partnering with these people to create their sports marketing. It's like they're just a real human being. Sure, often there are athletes in sports around the world that may have created bad reputations for for the masses in their same position, but for the most part, man, I I I think it can be kind of condensed down to just having really, really strong relationships with these people. And through those relationships is how you kind of create the magic, and you can create successful partnerships.
I think if there's any secret sauce to relationship building, at least from my perspective, the ethos that I guess I have or how I approach the world is that I want to bring value to the people that are around me. And I think that that's probably the strongest place to start when it comes to any relationship. When your intention is to bring value to someone, it makes it really easy to make a connection because you are coming there trying to be additive. If you come into a relationship looking for something, that's like you're everyone else in that case. Like everybody's trying to get stuff from you. But if you're coming to bring something, and especially with an athlete, like, hey, I want to help you and I want to be that extra like 0.1% to like help you along, that's where you get welcomed into the circle. If you're coming there just to take a little piece of their momentum or their clout, then that's not a great place to be. And I think the more you can be in that additive state, the easier progress you have.
Totally. And to I had to learn that, not the hard way, but like the nice thing about it was like I had to do that at Lululemon. And I will say I know things have changed quite a bit there now, and when I first started with the brand in 2015, I mean, we had a great mutual friend, uh,
Goto, the
Mr.
man,
David Godo, one of the most
legend.
unique people in the world.
Yes.
Arguably, still to this day, probably the greatest relationship builder I've ever met.
Yeah. He's
Oh,
he's
just
untouchable.
gifted,
Just yeah,
gifted.
incredible.
So I came in and thankfully joined forces with Godo, who had been with the brand for a few years, and had built out this rather large list of like beautiful relationships with really talented people across, I wouldn't even know how many sports or industries. And that was, sidebar. The beauty of that brand at the time was they were not endemic to any one sport. They were seen as this yoga athleisure brand, which
Yeah, just
actually
comfortable clothes that anybody could wear,
which
right?
which actually allowed a lot of the work that we were able to eventually do happen, because we were not intruding or stepping on any toes from a contractual perspective, which was super unique. And it was kind of you had to be a little crafty about it. But um, yeah, when I first started with the brand, Godo had kind of built this kind of structure around these really amazing people that truly were amazing people. Like a lot of them were not household names. They were not leaders of their sport in terms of results. They were not world champions. Some of them were, sure. But for the most part, what they were was amazing people. Like people you actually want to spend time with.
Yes.
People who were like genuine salt of the earth human beings within their respective spaces and worlds. And that's why the brand would partner with them initially. And to understand that, like there was no money. There was nothing. The budgets for the team were next to nothing at that stage. There was no financial compensation to any of these athletes. It was purely relationship driven, and it was because of the offerings that the brand had in place around this program that Godo had built, and I then came in and fostered further. Um, because of those offerings, because we treated them like amazing people they were, you saw the shift in like amazing kind of willingness to pretty much do anything for the brand. Again, we were not paying anyone at this stage. And then over the course of kind of my time there, which was like 5.5 years, I tweaked things a bit as culture and the sporting environment and sponsorship shifted. We had to adapt to the times, as well as, keep in mind this was a brand on an absolute rocket ship.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. 2015 Lululemon, slightly different place than they are today, but still, it
Even
feels like
from
it's
the time that I started, it was I think just under $1 billion brand, and when I left, it was a $4 billion brand.
bonkers.
Like
So,
you can't even like think of those numbers. It's ridiculous.
yeah, it's unfathomable to that level of scale in a pretty short amount of time. We were there for like just over 5 years. What
Mm-hmm.
what was the purpose for their athlete program? Because obviously athletes were wearing Lululemon and they were occupying spaces and stuff, but like what was the reason why? Were they trying to solve a problem? Did it just feel like the right thing to do? Could you articulate too? Because I think one of the hardest things when it comes to a relationship like that is when they do want to give back or the athletes want to be involved on some level, they want to have a clear target of like what would make you happy. Like you've done a lot for them to help them with, some gear or to open up opportunities for them. But like, how do they pay that back to you in a way that feels natural and honest?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, um, the brand was still very unknown outside of it being, and as I said, a yoga athleisure brand, and also very female dominated athleisure brand. It was, we were, and my wife worked there at the same time, and she was on the public relations team. And one of her kind of areas was building the men's side of the business, which again, when I started, was like, I'm not going to wear Lululemon. Like I'm a guy, I'm not going to wear Lululemon, which was like turned out to be a joke, and then it really skyrocketed and is now a very big part of the business. But so twofold. It was how do we expand the brand's presence outside of what culture and society know it as? So how do we leverage people in different sporting spaces to look, see, show, tell what this brand is about, aside from product, beautiful product, and how do we partner with the right people to do that in those spaces? Again, we weren't charging or targeting the leaders in those sports from a performance perspective. It was leaders in the sports in terms of outstanding pillars of that culture or unit of sport. So, it would be someone who would maybe be a top 10 athlete, or the guy in the athlete lounge at the X Games who is known by everyone because they're a really damn good person and they connect with other people, and they just like they're the guy or the girl, like.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by like the pillars of those sports or sporting worlds. So we strategically kind of went after um, people in a wide array of areas, um, to just slowly infiltrate those spaces. Um, on the men's side of things, like I'm sure you've worn Lulu in your time. I probably sent you some.
You sent me a gift card to go to the Lulu store. It was like the greatest day of, well, my life, but also my wife. I brought her with, and I was like, hey, you want to split this with me? And we went to town. It was like the best day ever. But also, it's interesting to think about like the impact that that actually had, though, because I think that especially when it comes to soft goods, when you're in person with a lot of people and they see a new piece of clothing and they can feel it and touch it and you can tell them how good it is, the downstream effect of that at scale is like pretty substantial. Like it costs you, 100 or 200 bucks to send me like a gift card, but then like the amount of people that I told and showed like this new piece of gear that I was hyped on and how excited I was about it, you probably made that money back 10 times over, you know?
Well, and that was the exact kind of philosophy with our athletes too. Like, sure, they would have their personal allotment, but I can't remember which year it was, but I kind of created a shift where I implemented it into their contracts, where like I wanted to give them the power of gifting. So, like, on top of what they would get for themselves, their personal allowance, I was like, all right, you know, for 2 quarters of the year, I'm giving you X amount of dollars to spend on other people in your world who you feel are either worthy or um, deserve or would like to, like, if you would like to gift some of our product. And it's a premium brand. It's like the product's amazing. It's beautiful. Um, and so that would actually, when I would empower them to do it, man, that would make a massive difference.
Yeah.
And they would get like the next up and coming kid in the sport, or like a coach or whatever it may be, and all of a sudden, like the fingers spread, and you're getting your product out there and on other really respected, influential people, because this is going back to relationship and choosing the right people as a brand. Like attracts like.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you choose to support or bring on an athlete for your brand or your business, it's like choosing that right person is so key. And it's not choosing them for the results. Like, sure, most brands will do that. That's great. That's a very short term strategy, in my opinion. The long term brand play is like, let's partner with really solid humans,
Hmm.
because we know that they and themselves within their network are either viewed the same and it will associate with the same kind of people. And that's the kind of way that you can keep your brand consistency and your brand message solid through the right people. Like, nobody wants to put your product on, excuse my language, a dickhead. Like,
Yeah.
like sure, your short term game will be great, but if people actually know that person and are like, yeah, that guy's, well, that chick's not, she doesn't get it, or that would actually be some terminology we would use a lot, is like, dude, does this person get it?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm sure at Red Bull you would get the same thing. You'd get 10 to 15 people cold calling or emailing you a day, wanting to be a part of what you were doing. And obviously you got to be pretty selective about who you actually take time with to talk to, because it's pretty overwhelming at times. And it's so funny how trained people are, and I'm sure it's still the same. Where like you'd get on the phone, and the first thing they do is list off their achievements,
Yeah. Yep.
and I would like forcefully stop them, and I'd be like, yo 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 yo, I know you're good at what you do. Like, you're a pro athlete for a reason.
Hmm.
I and I would usually stump people, because I'd be like, I actually don't care about that. And then there'd be silence on the phone, because they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I've won this, this, and this, and like my goal is to be top 5 here and here." And I'm like, "Cool, cool, yeah, nah, that's great, man. Like, I love that. I love that for you. That's awesome." But I don't actually care about that. Like, I want to know more about you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
who are you outside of your sport? Like, what are your hobbies? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Like,
Yeah.
what are your issues? Like, what are you scared of? What do you love? Because
That's so
then you
much more.
start to see that. you start to see the character of people, right? And
Yeah, you get the surface area, right? And then like you can build from that. Building off of just competition, like how are you supposed to really activate that in a meaningful way? Yeah, if they win, great, whatever. But you and I were talking before, like most athletes lose 70% of the time. So like, do you really want to
yeah,
build a
yeah.
strategy around winning when like there's only a 30% chance that's actually going to be the case? And you're pointing yourself into a pretty dark corner when there's so much more. And if you find the right athletes who have more to offer, like if that's all you have to offer your contest results, we have a real problem.
Mm. And like, let me be clear, it's not easy to do. Like, and I said earlier, it's like sports marketing can be easy, but it takes time. It takes relationship building. It takes one-on-one FaceTime. It takes hanging out, having a coffee 5 times before you get this like glint at, oh, whoa, that could be something we could tie to this campaign or this moment that the brand's having. Like, wow, there's synergies. All of a sudden, there's
Yeah,
a red thread between something that nobody knows about this athlete and the brand that I'm representing as a sports marketer.
that depth
Um, and I
is,
and
yeah,
I know that's what you guys would do at Red Bull,
yeah. Well, the
because
thing that
that's where the goods are, right? That's where the really cool content comes from, or the cool meaningful projects. Or
the way that I solved for that at Red Bull was every athlete that I signed, I would commit to learning their sport, which was kind of a double whammy because A, it was like Neo in the Matrix. You could just plug in, like, I know Kung Fu. You could pick up a sport from one of the best athletes in that sport. And Dylan, who's on this pod with me, we really connected. I signed him to Red Bull because of who he was, and we were, excited from him on every level. But then over the next 6 months, Dylan and I worked together to get me into shape to run a 50K. And Dylan wrote my training plan and got me like, hey, this is the gear you need. This is the nutrition you need. And then he showed up at the race and like cheered me on for this race. And the connection that we made over that 12 weeks of me training up and me asking him questions and watching videos and really learning as much as I could about the sport, but also like interacting with him and building trust and having deep discussions as I was going through this process really cemented the foundation of our friendship and allowed me into the inner circle of knowing more about him so that when it came time to come up with ideas for projects, come up with activations, ask him to join in certain things, or even having the visibility to know what I thought I could add to his program, it was there because we'd gone deep, and that depth is something that's so important. Like you said, having coffee a bunch of times and like really getting to know these people so that you can sort of mine out the gems that are really going to resonate with a wider audience than just what a result is going to turn out.
the meaningful stuff is not going to come from a Zoom call. It's really not. And that from a larger organization perspective, that's what is often very difficult for, I think, other business units or people within other parts of the business to understand, and for good reason, because it takes time, it takes money, it takes good budgets to be able to, and a lot of trust, to be able to like go to an event and just hang, and everyone else in the greater organization is looking at you like, what the hell is this person doing? Just having a good time. And it's like, kind of sick of going here every 6 years, like for 6 years now, um, but that's what it takes. And it's a lot of time and a lot of effort, but it can just be that one moment when you're having dinner, not talking about your sport, talking about something random. And that's where like the spark happens, where you're like, wow, there's the idea,
Yeah.
or there's the true person, not the athlete.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's something that should be adopted more. And I mean, I think to add more color to it, like the time I was at Lulu and trying to implement some of the stuff was a really weird time with media too. It was like social was still pretty juvenile. It was pretty easy to get wins. There's a lot of brands who won because of a very small time frame within the social world, that are still profiting from it now.
Yeah.
Um, it's a lot more difficult to do now, that's for sure. Um, but I think there's still, I'm a huge brand guy, like brand marketing guy. Um, that's where the beauty of storytelling is, and I think there's still really good opportunity to weave in beautiful brand marketing and product marketing into things these days. And I say that just because I kind of am on the other side of the fence now.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel
in
like there's a
terms
brand
of
marketing renaissance coming. I feel like in
it's
a
becoming,
way,
yeah.
like performance and growth marketing has like had its time to shine. And just like you were talking about the early wins of social media where it was easy to, scratch out wins and get momentum. I feel like that time has, kind of come and is about to kind of like exit slowly, or it just won't be as easy. I think it's always going to be part of it, but I just think,
Well, it's now too expensive.
yeah.
It's too congested, and we've all been trained um, to a point where our attention spans are like, I think it's like what I think it's something like 4 seconds or something, maybe even less.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be
Um,
really, really good at doing it for it to work. But the days of I put $1 in and I get $5 out, I think that's
oh, good
probably a
luck. Yeah,
wrap. Yeah.
no, that's donezo. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's not to say that it still can't work. Um, I think that's where pushing the boundaries needs to happen a little more. Everyone plays very safe these days.
So let's dig into this brand thing because after Lulu, you end up at Fox Racing. You're the global marketing manager, which is massive. Tell me all about it. I want to hear about this.
I've always raced bikes, um, and I originally moved from New Zealand, as I said, to the North America. I moved to Canada, um, to Vancouver. One of the big attracting things there was the mountain biking. Um, my brother was living there. Fortunately, he was a very good racer, racing World Cups downhill, um, and was like, "Man, this is the place for you. You got to come." So, long story, I kind of grew up racing motocross, always raced bikes, and Fox was always a funny enough a part of my life since I was like 5 years old or 4 years old. So when my wife and I left Canada during the pandemic, I always knew my next thing. Well, we knew our next thing needed to be in the States, and I was always very tempted by the bike industry, having worked with the best, athletes in the world at the time when I was at Lulu. And a lot of people don't even know this probably, but like, I had Aaron Gwynn, Miriam Nicole, who are still to this day, like, and they were Red Bull athletes, as
Yep.
still are. Some of the biggest names and fastest riders on the planet still. And then with my own racing, racing a couple of World Series, all the Canada stuff at a decent level. Um, I'd always had my like foot half in the door of the bike world, and so I always said I was like, if I do go into the bike world, I want to go in with like a big company.
Mm.
Um, and so then entering the States as a foreigner was not an easy thing. One took me about 18 months to be able to work, which was a very interesting time in my life. It was really tough too because it was middle of pandemic. A lot of soul searching when your hands were literally tied behind your back and you couldn't work and contribute, and it was mentally it was really challenging. But I was lucky enough to kind of get in with Fox and get in at a time where they were on the tail end of the pandemic. Like a lot of brands in the bike industry, they had kind of decimated their workforce at the onset of what most thought was going to be a pretty tumultuous time, which it was, but also a very profitable time. So I was lucky enough to come into the brand and lead the mountain bike category within Fox. Obviously Fox, for those listening, is a bike sport company, so they do motorcycle and bike cycling, mountain biking. And so I was lucky enough to kind of step into the global role on that side with a very lean workforce, which at the beginning was a little daunting, but then it actually became really great because you could really wrap your hands around a lot of the business,
Yeah.
which was really cool. And you know, you're sitting in daily meetings with like the CEO and head of all departments is always good for someone's career.
Yeah.
Who's like myself, I'm very aspirational and love to learn all facets of business. And so, even just sitting in those rooms when you are clearly the least educated, or or often feel like the dumbest person in the room, which actually is my favorite position to be in, um, was super strong and good for me personally. And then, as I said earlier, like I came in on the other side of the table. I was no longer sports marketing. I was like, cool, how do I integrate sports marketing into our greater global marketing strategy or plan or roadmap? And that was a really fun time because I could completely apply all those learnings. And, just rewinding to Lulu, it was a real challenge doing sports marketing there at the time. I think it's certainly shifted now because at the time, reality was they didn't need sports marketing.
Mm. Yeah.
That thing was
Yeah.
on a rocket ship. They were
Yeah.
doing stuff no one else was doing. They were creating community work that was incredible, grassroots work that was incredible, events that were amazing that just hooked people in instantly. Um, and it was sure a good product, but it was also how they went about it. It was like the personal development work. It was the coaching. It was like, and that again with all the athletes I worked with was a lot of the value was like working with them doing values workshops, planning their 10-year vision. Like, did I work with people there that like would ring me up 4 years after offboarding them and be like, yeah, like I achieved my 5-year goal and like I'm living on a
That's
boat. It's like, all
that's
thanks to
so
you.
cool.
It's like, what? It's
This is
incredible.
like that extra 1% that we're talking about. Like, can you come in and just give people that extra little bit? And that's the stuff that
Well,
matters.
that's true value. Like
Yeah.
dollars, sure, dollars are nice. But is that actually valuable? What's going to keep giving you interest, so to speak? Where's the compounding interest? And like doing work like that works on the person, not the athlete, was where like the true value was with that brand. But like going back to it, like honestly, they didn't really, I think at the time, believe in sports marketing and or need it. I
Mm.
think now that they're at this point of like inflection where they're massive and they're up against your Nikes, your Adidas's, at that level. Not still, obviously, not quite at that level, but they're an enormous brand.
Yeah.
Now is the time, and you see it with some of the stuff they're doing, especially in golf, which is really cool. Um, where they're actually starting to pull some sports marketing levers in a bigger way that I can tell from the outside the business is behind.
Yeah.
Because quite often that wasn't really the case, again, because it didn't really need to be. But jumping back to Fox, like it's purely a sports marketing company. Like literally, they're making product for sports, whereas Lulu was not. It was athleisure. It was like you could compete in this, or you could just do everything day to day in it, which
Yeah.
has ended up being the mass market for them. Um, so yeah, Fox was a really good time. It was really great people. It was obviously dove into a world that I was mega passionate about and still am. Um, and yeah, I mean, to say the bike industry on the inside is interesting is an understatement. Um, it was definitely, and then honestly, I think this is, and because I've talked to a lot of people about this, you hold these brands in such high regard, and that they seem so huge on the outside and these absolute monsters, and you get inside, and you're like, oh, this is it, like.
Just a handful of
And
people trying to make the dream
just working too
perpetuate.
much and having too much on their plates. Yeah, that's pretty much it for most companies, from my experience. Um, so yeah, I think there's always this allure for when you're on the outside that you have of these brands that you want to work with. Um, but it comes down to like good work that's been done in the past, right? And again, coming back to brand marketing, like I didn't want to be a part of like these brands because they make amazing product. Like the product's good, sure, but the brand is like where the heritage is. It's where I identify, like that's what you want to
Yeah.
do. And so that was a Fox was a cool chapter, and was able to do some really cool things there and bring I think a very different perspective to their world, which I feel like they're still adopting and um, doing well with. The brand itself has gone through a lot of change, mainly because of acquisition and being picked up by parent companies. And I mean, I imagine it's a tough place to work right now, as they're really, the industry obviously is not thriving, as you probably know.
Yeah.
Um, and when you have people overseeing like roles within three brands, it's
It's not really brand building when you have one person operating three brands. Like brand is supposed to be intention. Brand is supposed to be the spirit of some, and it's supposed to have something. And if you have three people trying to tell the same thing but through three different, it just doesn't make any
three
sense. Like that
different
should,
conflicting brands.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
kind
competing brands or whatever. Like
yeah,
that should be illegal. Actually, like it's just
yeah. Well, I mean, we see that across industries, right? Like the surf industry is probably the best worst example, which is
yeah.
so sad. But that's the kind of state where we're all in, and kind of got to make the most of it when you can. So
Matt Trappy actually posted something recently on Substack where he kind of went into some of the surf stuff and was talking about sort of the licensee brands and how like so many of these brands are just now on autopilot essentially, and how detrimental that is. And thankfully, it doesn't appear that
yeah, I
grooming
had
has
a
gone
read of
that way yet.
that.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'll put it in the show notes this one so everybody else can check it out.
Yeah, and it's I think a lot of people who aren't maybe in the not in the know, but up to speed with how those things work. Like it's, I struggle to see how there's ever going to be a big win out of it. Like it's really hard when these brands are sold off to these parent companies who, from the outside, are in it for the money.
Yeah,
Um, and Billabong saw that happen last year. I had a couple of friends that were there for 10 plus years who were kicked out of the country because of this new takeover. And yeah, it is the end of an era for a lot of those brands and ways of working. And but it also it also opens up huge opportunity for newness,
yeah,
which I think is the silver lining you need to take. And as people that work in these worlds, like that's the way you got to look at it, because it does create opportunity.
yeah.
I mean, as silly as it sounds, it's like war. Most people make their money during war, like these big industries, which is a horrible thing to think of. But it's a similar way of looking at it, and um, you got to find the silver lining somehow. And I'm hoping that the bike world, because I know you're invested in it, and so am I. Like I hope it pulls through this weird phase and comes out on top. And
It is going through a really tough phase, and what I think is interesting for all the different things. I mean, Nike had a huge layoff early last year, and the people that have left since then, a lot of them are starting new things. A lot of them are taking that talent to a new brand. A lot of them are getting involved with other competing brands, and so like the talent gets kind of spread apart into these other areas, and people become more competitive. The challenge brands keep coming up because they're soaking up all that talent, or in the case of Courier, people are starting new brands that are sort of the thing that they're passionate about and excited about. We started this podcast like kind of teasing that we were going to talk about this, and I think now is the right time to dig into it. You co-founded a brand called Courier. You guys make some of the best socks that I've worn, and now they're for running, for cycling, for like really getting after it. I have a box of them that I've been just ripping through, just testing them all out and stuff. But talk to me about sort of how this whole thing began.
these things, like maybe they're part of a life cycle. Maybe these things need to happen in order for newness to actually be created, because that's kind of the case here with me and starting this business. I'd been through the corporate juggernaut a bunch of times, and when and I know you can probably relate to this, when you give yourself all of yourself to these brands, to the work that you love, it does take its toll, right? And often when you leave those positions and those situations, in times of reflection, you're like, damn, like what have I been doing for the last 5 years? Like, where have the last 5 years gone? Like, I know I was like that after both Lulu and Fox, and um, I got to this point of like, man, I really want to maybe try things my way, and um, and 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 start something of my own. And so that was kind of one of the original sparks. I never knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to create something, right? And I was like, what is it going to be? What is it going to be? When's the idea going to come? And and like a lot of things, this career came out of a bit of a low that I was in. Um, so at the start of 2023, I snapped my Achilles, which, I've always been, someone that does a lot of sport, like track and field, like national level, like rugby national level, baseball national level, international level, racing bikes, like a lot. So I've always been this active person, and snapping the Achilles was always my biggest fear. And I've had a lot of injuries. And I was playing touch rugby, and the thing just went big time.
Oof.
Um, Surgery, had to reattach it. And it also coincided with the time where I'd kind of started my own marketing agency. Um, Not out of desperation, but out of like a searching and longing for like, what the hell is next? Going back to this, leaving the corporate world. Um, and so I was like in a pretty dark space, I would say, where I was like, God, what am I doing? Like, I know I have like skills and I can probably do stuff. And like, I was applying for a shitload of jobs, I'll be honest. And, I think I actually have a folder on my computer because my wife went through something similar where we had applied for like 80 plus jobs. And like, for the most part, you're reading these job descriptions, you're like, yeah, I'm a shoo-in for this. Like, I've got great experience. I know people at the company, like, and 99% of the time, nothing hits. And so, like, I was in this hole, and I was like, maybe I should just do my own thing. Started the agency, snapped the Achilles. So it was in a pretty dark space. But out of those spaces often comes like good nuggets, right? So we were fortunate enough to be in Europe, my wife and I, for a wedding of our good friends. And we were like, shit, we haven't been on a holiday in a long time. Like, we have to go to this wedding, right? So let's make the most of it. And so we'd planned out this big bike packing trip through the French Alps, which I'd never been to the French Alps, always wanted to go, especially as a mountain biker. I was always
Yeah.
like, oh, I
Oh,
really want to go. So, but then obviously the Achilles hit, and I was working my butt off to recover and get back to some sort of function. And as a lot of people listening probably know, Achilles is kind of key to a lot of things.
yeah. That's kind of a
And
necessary element.
it's generally a very slow, long recovery. Luckily, I managed to recover pretty well. And about 4 weeks, well, no, 3 weeks from like departing to go to Europe, I was still planning on it. I was like, I'm still gonna do this bike packing trip. Um, I got back on the bike and was able to ride my road bike. Um, and I was in PT three, 4 times a week. And about a week before I was to go, my PT, like, I was telling him what I was planning on doing next week, and he was like, and then he texted my surgeon and was like, do you think this is a good idea? And one word response was like, stupid. And so then I'm like, ah, oh, damn it. Like, my wife's going to be annoyed. Like, we booked all these Airbnbs. Like, I don't want to. And so anyway, fast forward, we did the trip. I got an e-bike. It was amazing. We managed to do this 3 or 4 day bike pack throughout the French Alps. And we landed our last day in Morzine, which, for those that don't know, Morzine is kind of the Whistler mecca of mountain biking in Europe, at least in the French Alps. Always wanted to ride there. And so I find myself sitting in this little cafe, Satellite Coffee. I see a few people I know. But of course, I can't ride a mountain bike. Like, no way. Like, I had zero strength. I can barely pedal a e-bike. But I'm sitting there and I'm like contemplating, like, damn, pretty bummed. Can't do what I really want to do here. I've waited years to be in this place. Um, but I was also in a really nice headspace at the same time, where my brain was really firing on all cylinders, and I'd come up with a few business ideas. And one of them was like, I started questioning a few things. I was like, why does socks not like support you in a way that they should? And at the time, I was putting KT tape on my Achilles every morning to go and ride, and it was all mainly proprioceptive stuff and um, more of a sensation thing than anything. It wasn't truly physically helping me. It was more, cognitive. And so I started kind of going down a bit of a rabbit hole on socks and like, what if socks made you feel that way? And then being a product nerd that I am, and after working in apparel for most of my career, I was like, maybe socks is a thing. In the road cycling space, socks has always been a real thing. It's like a trend thing. Um, and so I went further and further down this rabbit hole of like looking into socks and then kind of questioning a lot that was going on, and soon realizing that socks is a category that's just been forgotten, and it's just an accessory, and
Yeah.
it's just, oh, let's tag it onto that purchase, and so then I started diving into the worlds that it and things that it interacts with, right? And so I also love running, big runner, and that was a big goal of mine post surgery from Achilles snapping, was to get back to some sort of decent run shape. And started looking at footwear and was like, damn, like, and I'm sure you can relate and the audience can relate. The footwear market in the run space in the last 6, 7 years, like you rewind 6, 7 years, you look at shoes then, you look at shoes now, you'd be like, hold on, what's happened?
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the amount of tech, the amount of advancement and growth in that product, in that space, has
Quantum
been
leap.
phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really awesome, right? Really cool. Carbon plated, like volume sole, rocker, you name it, like starting to use like Cordura, Gore. I mean, Gore's already kind of been there, but you catch my drift. And then on the opposite side, the other kind of piece of the bread of the sandwich, you've got us as humans. And we have adapted and developed so much as well. Like, look at what's now used for recovery. You've got all these tools and resources, and the knowledge that we now have around training programs, fueling, you name it, has advanced. And then the thing in the middle is the sock that, for the most part, has not really changed.
Yep.
It's a very basic garment that's knitted around a tube. And, the biggest claim that most brands can probably say in terms of advancing that thing is like use of different yarns or natural fibers or recycled yarns. And that's kind of it. And so after going down this big deep hole, I was like, man, maybe there's a real opportunity here. And so started kind of looking down that, and then that kind of snowballed into kind of where we are today. And um, it's one thing to have these good ideas, and at the same time, I actually had another business idea that I took right up to like nearly the finish line, which I will do at some point in my life. It's an ice cream truck, and it
Oh,
sounds
man.
it sounds very basic, but there's more to it. But maybe another episode. Um, having these ideas is great, but the most important thing, especially for me, like I'm an ideas guy and I can verbalize things and kind of get things moving, but I needed accountability partners. I needed other people to help me get this thing across the line. And so I started looking for help. um, and, we now have 5 co-founders of this company, that the other 4, I can't speak for myself, but the other 4 are all phenomenal leaders in their space, in their respective spaces. We've somehow managed to establish this rock star team, um, that, luckily for us, we were able to kind of get this brand and product up and running with just the 5 of us, from website to product to design to legal to patents to funding to like the works. And it's all just because of who we surrounded ourselves with, you know.
Yeah.
And
How did you go about assembling that team? Because I've seen some of the people that are in that on that list, and they're absolute hitters. How did you think about putting that team together?
I mean, it was again going back to the start of what we talked about, it's relationships, right? So one of my co-founders, Tom, um, I had been introduced to Tom, and actually I was at Lulu. He had started this amazing hydration company called SOS Hydration out of New Zealand. And now Tom's from the UK, he's British. He also happens to be a former Commonwealth Games track athlete, like 1500 meters, like full professional runner, sub 4 minute miler, like weapon.
Yeah.
Still is at, I'm not even sure what his ripe old age is, but he's probably mid 40s. Um, hopefully that's right. um, but
Always
you know,
aim low on that one.
yeah, I've been introduced to Tom, right? And I literally had one conversation with the guy on the phone, and I can remember it, and it was probably in 2017. And I really got along well with him. You know, we had great banter. We were talking a lot. He was super passionate about what he was doing, and at the same time, he had a number of things going on. The guy's very accomplished. He was also the CEO of the America's Cup,
No
which
big
for
deal.
those that don't know, it's like the oldest sporting event on the planet. Um, and so through another connection, through another bit of work I was doing, I rekindled this relationship with Tom, and he was like, "Oh, I'm actually passing through Southern California next week," and I was like, "Oh, sweet." And I was talking to him about this other business that I was helping out. And so in the back of my mind, I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to take this guy out surfing and I'm going to pitch him in the water. So I literally pitched Tom in the water on this idea, knowing that he was this, you know, ex-runner, passionate about product and high performance and a real go-getter. And so I pitched him the idea and you know, while we were sitting out back and um, he was quiet for quite a while. And he just kept saying, fascinating in his British accent, which usually generally sounds smart. Um, and so then he proceeded to call me every day for like 2 weeks and was like, he'd get on and be super excited. And then just be like, oh, I've been looking into this. This is a huge market. Like there's so much potential here. And I was like, yeah. So anyway, we had Tom and kind of hooked him line and sinker, which was great. Because I really needed someone like him who had like the more rounded business leadership
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah.
And then again, just started tapping doors, knocking on doors, and luckily a good friend who you know was formerly the head of innovation at Lulu, a big swinger. He he had just left, I think Adidas at the time, as head of innovation there, and I got on a call with him, and he, you know, and just to put that in perspective, he was very much like high level business, and I was like this minion. And the fact that we struck a relationship up back in the day purely, I think it was over rugby or something. He himself also was British, as most intelligent sounding people are. He's one of the most fascinating people to talk to. But purely like his keenness and relationship skills to like work, even talk with someone of my level at the time, you know, huge kudos to the guy. But he kind of validated the idea we had and was like, yeah, you guys need to talk to this guy. And I won't say his name because he is the head of something at another company, um, who's our product engineer. And turns out he's probably one of the best in the world at it, which was amazing. And so we got connected with him, and we'll call him Terry. For the sake of this conversation. And so luckily with Terry, he brought a huge wealth of knowledge and connections in the product space. And there goes that tick. And we are like, okay, we're doing this well. And then, you know, Tom's wife was head of logistics at Singapore Airlines, which helps.
Yeah.
And so she knows a hell of a lot about everything on the back end. And so she was incredibly talented. And so she's also a founder. And then I thought it would be rude not to bring my wife in, who's an absolute brand guru. Um, she's worked with a lot of big companies and brands, from Lulu to Electronic Arts to Reef, um, and now works at a pickleball startup of all things.
That's
But
awesome.
built a stunning brand out of that. It's a really beautiful example of what you can do with a small niche sport. But yeah, we just kind of assembled this powerhouse group of very like-minded people that were extremely passionate about what we're providing for, which is this world of riding and running. And honestly, at the end of the day, man, it's like we're creating a product that I want. I want,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I
If
think
everything
that's
goes
how
sideways, you've got socks for the rest of your life that are
I've
really
still got a
awesome.
I've still got a drawer full of socks, and I think that's a really important thing to note is like you should never go out to make money, right? Like make something you want to use and use every day, which is again the beauty of a sock. We all use them pretty much every day. And so that's kind of how we got rolling and wanting to build a brand that actually meant something too. And that was kind of one of the opportunities within socks. I thought, from my position as a brand marketer and kind of sports marketer was like, that was one of the opportunities that I've identified in this market. And just so everyone knows, like we're very young. We literally launched in like, I think end of September,
Yeah.
2024.
It's
So we're like crawling.
just
Um,
getting off the ground. But how exciting. I mean, this is like an early
yeah,
point, of like you're off the ground, you've established it, you've put it out there, you have this dream team of people. It seems like the only element missing is just time now. You got the idea,
yeah.
which is the hardest part for most people. You found the people to step in and help you. I always talk about how like I run out of talent and I have to find people to help me like fill the next gap. You found the people to make sure that you don't run out of talent to actually get
No,
this
I
thing
think
across the
that's
line.
well, and it's knowing when you need it too, right?
Yeah. That's the
It's
hardest part is identifying that.
being aware enough and self-aware enough to be like, you know what? I have no idea what I'm doing here. Like this is where my knowledge stops and
Yeah.
where I need to ask for help. Um, and so, yeah, we're on this really exciting journey where we're starting to speak to, we're creating this product for runners and riders, which in itself is a slightly different approach than I think most brands, and it kind of comes back to our brand DNA of creating products for what we like to call, our customer is kind of this Renaissance athlete, um, which we've kind of identified as an audience that no brand is seemingly talking to. Um, sure, there's companies out there that make products across a number of disciplines, but no one collectively speaks to that one group as a singular person or customer. And so
Mhm.
that's kind of our approach here is speaking to this Renaissance athlete, but then also championing that way of living. And I guess what that means is it's kind of championing being a kind of seasoned generalist, which is funny for me because that's kind of how I've approached my career. Is like I want to be good at a lot of things.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't want to be a specialist, and I think that's where in culture and society today, I feel there's gonna be some issues down the line, and we see it in sport. We see it in pro sport, where you got this Tiger Woods model that most people think is the way to do it,
Mhm.
where you're thrust into the sport at an age of 5, and that is your life. And I strongly oppose that because although it seems like it might work, he is the complete anomaly.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you actually drill into these people that we aspire and admire and who lead global sport, they've often found their niche after being pretty damn good at a lot of things. Like even if you look at the tennis world right now, like Cynic, who's number one in the world, I think right now. He's a phenomenal skier. You look at Roger Federer, arguably the GOAT, similar situation. He tennis was the last thing he found. Before that, he was a skier. I think he was a runner. Like he was all these things, right? And And so as a brand, as Courier, that's kind of what we're trying to um, promote is like, you know what? The more we do, the more we push ourselves in sport, the greater our knowledge base becomes. Like to me, like sport is the greatest teacher.
Yeah.
And I imagine to you and to anyone listening, like you just stop and ask yourself, where have some of the greatest lessons in your life come from? Often sport is the vehicle for that. And to me personally, that is like the biggest thing. Like all my resilience is from sport. All my hard work is from sport. All my like teamwork is from sport. All my drive, like if you can kind of funnel most of it back there. And it's something that's not really talked about. And so, we're a brand that is championing that. And we're not championing like a participation medal. That's not what we're about. Like if you're going to do something, do it. Like
Mm.
go all out, empty
Yeah.
the tank, because that's where the goods come. You're not going to learn much by just showing up and participating often. It's like if you show up and you empty the tank, you give it your all, you strive to be better that day at that thing, like that's when you learn shit. That's when you crack it. And
Intentional.
it's yeah, and it trickles through to life, and at the end of the day, it creates better people. And that's what we should all, maybe that's the meaning of life. I don't know,
We
but
just
it's
uncovered
just
it.
yes. But that's kind of what we're about, and doing that through a product seems funny, but doing that through a product that can relate to all these worlds and can add an element of performance, comfort, and style to that way of living is kind of where we're channeling. So
It's interesting to think about intention in that capacity, where if you are going out to really give it your all, the intention that you put behind it, not only your effort, but what you're putting on to go achieve that effort. You've likely overlooked socks in the past. You've just gone with what was there. And now that there's an option to put something on that's high performance, that's going to make you, give you what you need to actually really perform at your highest level with intention, that's the brand right there, right? Like we help you interact with the thing that you love with the highest level of intention. If you've thought about everything all the way down to your socks before you go out and do this thing, then you've given it 100% before you even get to the start line or before you even tackle this task. If everything has been an afterthought leading up to that point, how could you expect to be successful?
great example of that. To bring it like physical, don't go out and buy $400 speed shoes if you're going to put on $10 cotton socks.
Yeah,
like
fair.
like there's a disconnect, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's and which we're just trying to do things a little different, like even how we're categorizing our socks, like we're categorizing them based on sensation. Like have you ever been asked how you want your socks to make you feel?
Wild. I love it.
Probably not, right? Like, and so it's just trying to like look at a box and see a circle. That's generally how I like to approach most things in life, is like, cool, how can we do that different? um and so now instead of going into your bike shop or your run shop and having to buy the running sock, you're actually like propositioned with, okay, like how do you want to feel on your run today?
I love it.
And when
So
you actually drill into that, like, and you ask that of yourself and of others, like they'll often come back and be like, well, no, I actually like a thin sock that actually makes me feel connected to my footwear. Or actually, 50% of people will be like, no, I actually like a cushion sock because I like to feel like hugged and protected and confident. And so that's how we've, positioned our first two models within our first kind of series of products. To again just be a little bit different and to like expand people's thinking around their product and how it can interact with their life and how it can actually just make them feel a bit better about what they're doing that day, or how they go about it. So it's
amazing.
exciting. There's a lot of fun, exciting things in the works as well, which I'm really excited to bring to market later this year. And
We got to do another pod in 1 year because we've captured the launch, we've captured the establish phase of Courier, but in a year, no doubt you're going to learn a ton of lessons. Your team is going to be learning things. You're going to, it's that Mike Tyson quote, like everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. right? Or if you want to go all Anton Saint Exupery, the battle plan never survives contact with the enemy. Same thing, just a couple hundred years apart. But like in a year, what you will have learned will likely be even more. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have a lot more to talk about. I think even now that it's like out into the open, and now that you get to interact with people, and you're going to have sales data, and you're going to have key learnings that are going to be popping up left, right, and center. So I think this only gets more interesting. But again, just like we started this conversation, putting yourself in situations where you don't know all the answers and having to work your way out of it and learn and adapt and survive that's the
Mm.
only way to live, man.
Well, and it's putting yourself out there. Like we even on our call with our team, like our weekly calls, we're like we often have to like because you get in the weeds, right? And we often have to stop and be like, guys, we have a product in market. Like we're selling it. People are actually buying this. Like,
Yeah.
who would have thought? And because our story is our story from conception to like go to market was rapid. Again, it's because of the team. It's because of who we have, and luckily the experience we all have and the connections we have with factories and whatnot. And so we've been very lucky in that sense. But you know, and so we often have to sit back and be like, okay, we're actually selling something that people are actually buying. And as someone who's worked for big brands like in the past, you often overlook that simple fact that you've created something out of nothing, which is something I've been really bad about in my career of like celebrating wins. Like I'm so shit at that. And it's something that's always a constant work on for me because I'm always looking to improve, which is a
Yeah.
double-edged sword.
Well, dude, this has been super fun. We usually end the podcast with this brand product content segment, which I teed you up for before we started. Uh, I can go first if you need a minute to think about it. Obviously,
I'm
like
gonna
the
I'm gonna
main.
need you to go first.
Okay, I mean, obviously the easy one and the main one would be to talk more about Courier, but we've gone deep on it, and I'm honestly like really excited on this, and I was super pumped just to. It's always fun talking to you anyway, but this has like been fun to kind of really dig into kind of where you started and how you got to this point, and now that you've actually launched it. But okay, I'm going to do a my brand. I don't know if this is brand or a product. Either way, Neuro Gum. This stuff right here. So nootropics are basically like vitamins for your brain. And actually, a long time ago, I went down this like rabbit hole of nootropics where you could like take things that just makes your brain operate on a higher level. But I saw this of all places on TikTok, and it's just like spearmint gum, or I don't even know what flavor it is. It was not, oh, peppermint gum, but it has nootropics in it. So you get to chew gum, but you also get nootropics delivered to your brain. Probably you'd get the same benefit from drinking a bunch of green tea, but I've been chewing this a lot before podcasts, and it kind of makes me a little bit sharper when it comes to asking questions and just keeping everything flowing. So I don't know, it just like it makes me better at doing my job, I guess. Little nootropic gum, neuro gum. You can find it basically anywhere, but this has been my little secret hack for all the podcasts I've been banging
You're
out
gonna have
lately.
to you're gonna have to send that link through.
Yeah, yeah.
Is this an Amazon purchase?
I actually did. I bought like a 5 or 6 pack of them on Amazon, where it has like a bunch of these little
What's the
crates.
actual nootropic in it?
L-theanine, I think, and
Oh,
there's
fantastic! I take that every
yeah.
night.
Well, there you go. It's loaded with L-theanine, B vitamins,
Mm.
and caffeine. There's caffeine in there, so even better. But yeah, this has been helping. I don't know. Maybe it's like a total placebo effect of like I'm chewing a nootropic gum and I feel amazing. I don't know.
That's the placebo's work. It goes
Yeah,
back to my KT tape on my Achilles.
yeah.
Cool.
All
And
right,
what's
all right.
the what's the was that your brand or your product or both?
Well, we just do one. You don't have to do all three.
Oh, I was thinking I
Yeah.
had to do all three. I was really
No,
excited to do all three.
I mean you're welcome to if you want, but usually,
I'm gonna do two. I'm gonna do
okay.
two.
All right, hit me with
And
two.
and and they have nothing to do with the sporting world or
Perfect.
the outdoors world.
This is just kind of like the thing that we get a chance to like share stuff that we're excited about, and that's like it's this giant bucket of like, what are you fired up about that we didn't talk about in the last hour?
Okay, so a brand for me, I know this is going to sound really weird and it probably gives you an insight into me a little more. The brand that I love, and I keep coming back to it, because of their brilliant brand marketing and product marketing, is a brand called Tushy.
Tushy. Okay.
So Tushy is a home bidet,
Interesting.
and honestly, game changer. As a product, it's a game changer. Their marketing is brilliant, um, and I'm sure there's listeners that have this product already. And congratulations, you're winning at life. Um, but like when you get it, when you get the physical product, and let me tell you, very easy to apply to your home toilet. Um, they give you this amazing little booklet that is basically your bathroom read, and hilarious quotes, hilarious sayings, and they've just done a phenomenal job. Like they are just so true to their brand, and it's hilarious. Um, but it's truly solid brand marketing, and it's like and it sounds odd, but until you experience it, the way their packaging, their witty comments here and there, is just brilliant. It's really really well done.
I love it. I feel like
A little
the
bit out of left
bidet
field.
thing in this, like if you don't grow up with that, I feel like it's a really awkward thing because you're like, what do I do? How does
I
this
didn't.
work?
I certainly didn't grow up with it. I think I was gifted one once, um, and now it's a highly gifted item, because it's just also good for your personal hygiene.
Yes.
The product, and I'm very passionate about this, is a company called Smithy Ironwear. Again, bit of left field. You probably didn't expect this. But as a product guy, like I
Yeah.
love really well thought out, beautifully articulated, considered products. And theirs is just that. We were fortunate enough to get some for our wedding. And it's one of those things like you invest in for life. It's like investing in a really good coffee machine.
Yeah.
I'm not talking a Breville. I'm talking like an Italian, a German coffee machine. Because sure, the upfront cost may hit you in the wallet, but you're going to have that thing for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Smithy Ironwear, this isn't an ad, but Smithy Ironwear is one of those brilliant products because it is really beautiful.
I think we take inspiration, or ideally we should be taking inspiration from outside of our industry. That's where all the good stuff, not to say there isn't good and interesting stuff happening within the outdoor industry, but if you're paying attention to what's happening outside and you can take even just a little of that essence,
It's
you know.
brilliant. It's brilliant. So and we haven't said this, but I actually work for Wilson Sporting Goods right now, big heritage tennis golf brand. Um, we had a meeting the other day with some of the team, and I kind of proposed a question to to the group. And just to give some context, that the brand had launched apparel about 3 years ago, so it's the biggest growing side of that business. It's beautiful stuff too. It's really really well done. But with a new category comes like a new positioning. Like, who are we trying to be in this world? And so the question I proposed was, and I'm a car guy, right? I love cars. My dad still races cars. I was like, what, as a brand, what car would we be?
Hmm.
It's often a good question to ask yourself, um, because everyone knows cars, and everyone knows the spectrum of cars from luxury down to everyday beater. Um, and when you say it like a vehicle, like if you were to pick out a brand like Smithy Ironwear, for example, to me would be probably like a Bentley or Rolls Royce. It's elevated and premium enough. It's beautifully constructed and considered. It's high quality. It's like it has this elegance to it. And so you can do that across the spectrum. And the reason I say that is because at Courier, one of the big ones for us is Porsche. I think I'm a big
Porsche
Porsche.
socks.
I'm a big Porsche guy. A lot of it, even from the silhouette of, a classic 911 whale tail, which for those that know, is like a beautiful, beautiful line, that has inspired some of our design features. And we continue to use Porsche as kind of like a inspirational kind of thing, um, moving forward. But anyway, it's a good one to try on
I
if
like
for anyone
that.
listening who works in marketing or brand, is like it's a nice way to like figure out where you position yourself in the market as well, or where you aspire to go to.
Perfect way to end it up. Thank you so much for sitting down with me and having this chat. I feel like there's a lot of nuggets in this conversation that I think a lot of people are really going to draw a lot of value from. And like I said, we got to get you back on here in like a year, check in, pod, see how things have gone. What
We're
are the
gonna be
latest learnings?
huge. We're gonna be huge. Oh, that's the goal. No, I really appreciate it, man. I love what you guys are doing. Um, you're an inspiration to me as well, from what you've done. And I don't know how many people do know the true Aaron, but what you've managed to do is really inspiring and really cool. So
Thanks,
kudos
man.
to you. You're cracking the code, and no, I really really appreciate the time.
I will be running into you very soon as soon as you make it back up to Oregon. And until then, I hope to see
Yes,
you in the Second Nature Slack channel with 500 other amazing
I'm gonna
entrepreneurs. And
I'm gonna get on there today. I'm gonna get on there today.
it is an incredible, incredible group of people. And like right before this pod started, I was scrolling through like the latest introductions, all hitters. Everybody that's in there, just all hitters. It's crazy in that Slack channel. There'll be a link in the show notes. If anybody listening to this isn't already in there, I cannot emphasize enough that you are missing out if you're not in Slack.